What's going on, everybody? This is Dr. Chris Featherstone here for yet another episode of UnSKripted. Listen, it's Tuesday nights. You know what that means. I have some of the biggest, the baddest, the best wrestlers of today and yesteryear, and today is no different. Tonight is no different. Why is tonight no different? Because this guy is one of the best, one of the greatest tag team specialists in the history of pro wrestling. And he's got a mean drop kick, ladies and gentlemen. One of the best has ever done it. And here's the thing, man. There's certain people who just are legends in the business. And I say this all the time. There's just certain people who just were just cut for tag team wrestling. And they're just so good at it. And they know how to have the chemistry with other people. And tag team wrestling is just so important when it comes to just the overall scope of pro wrestling in general. If there was all singles wrestlers, it would be boring. It wouldn't have that important layer that tag team wrestling presents. And so this guy knew from early on in his career that tag team wrestling was his specialty, and he was daggone good at it. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, former pro wrestling champion, pro wrestling tag team legend, he is Jumping Jim Brunzell. How are you, my man?
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I was very fortunate, and tag team wrestling is pretty much an art. You don't see it very much now in with both of the promotions, but we both Greg Gagne and I, and then also Brian Blair, we did our best to make the best of a match, and we were very fortunate. Had a lot of good talent to work with.
Indeed. Yeah, the High Flyers and the Killer Bees, you were a part of two of the best. So, two of the best babyface tag teams in the history of pro wrestling, you were a part of both of them. So that makes you the constant of the two. So you had definitely the tag team specialty to make both Gagne and Brian Blair look good, although they were very good in and of their own rights. You just added much more layers to them that helped them out as well. So it was good. It was good on both ends. It worked for both of you. So
well, you're right. That was very, very, very lucky to have such talented guys. And they were both real and unselfish. And sharing. Our goal was to have the best match we could have.
Yep.
And, I think, more than 80-90% of the time we did. We had a
Yeah.
good match. Yeah.
Absolutely. Before we get into these questions, you have anything to plug before we dive in?
Well, this is a book I wrote about 7 years ago. It's called Madlands, and
Nice.
that's me. And I was 6 years old there, and I was on an island in the Marshall Islands. My dad was in the Navy. He was a pilot for air sea rescue,
Mhm.
and we lived in Kwajalein, and that was the picture. And this book actually, there's 47 stories in this
Wow.
book. I wrote every single word of it, didn't have any ghostwriter, and it's available online with a company called Blurb,
Okay.
Blurb, Blurb, and I think it's $27. So I've sold a great many of them, and I was in New York maybe a couple weeks ago, and I sold 25 at an auction that I was at. So it's an entertaining book, and it's really clean. There's no real junk in there, so it's all true.
Congratulations, man. That's
Thank you.
that's awesome for selling it. Actually just so there you go. There's the link.
There it is.
For those who
Look
are
at that.
watching. Yeah, for those who are watching, go ahead and screenshot that. I'm actually about to put the link in the comments too.
No, good. Thank you.
So yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. Good stuff. All right. Let's dive into. I just I'm good friends with Greg Gagne,
Sure.
one of your partners, and your other partner Brian Blair. I just interviewed him about a couple of months ago, I think it was. So yeah, I got a chance to talk to him on the phone quite a bit over the past few months, and just a really nice guy. Yeah, I really
They both are. Yeah.
yeah. Greg, and I, yeah, we're good friends. That's
Yeah.
good stuff, man. You ready to dive into these questions?
Sure.
All right. Rito, greetings from Puerto Rico. What were your favorite memories from wrestling out here in Puerto Rico? And who are your 5 favorite heels of all time?
Oh boy. Well, I think I only wrestled once in Puerto Rico, and it was Brian and I at Clemente Stadium, and it rained so hard, and Hulk Hogan, and I believe it was might have been Paul Orndorff was the main event, but they had torrential rain and thunderstorms. And matter of fact, our big plane, when we took off, got hit by lightning on the way out of there.
Yikes.
Scared the daylights out of all of us. But it's funny because this match, I think you can get it on YouTube, and I believe it was with Mike Sharp and Bobby Orton's brother, Barry Orton. And honest to God, Doc, there was about this much water in the ring. There was about 2 inches of water. But probably the best heels that I've worked with, there's countless of them. But, Nick Bockwinkle was incredible. Bobby Orton Jr. Let me see. There's so many of them. Mad Dog Vachon. And some guys from the WWE. It was funny because our tag team, as the Killer Bees, most of all the real good heels were, in single matches.
Mm-hmm.
But we had some good opportunities. But those are a couple that I can think of right now. And I consider the greatest talent who I worked with in the business was Bobby Heenan, because he was an incredible manager.
Oh yeah,
and he only had an 8th grade education, Doc, and he could. He did stuff like that. His timing was
impeccable.
And another guy, Jake Roberts.
Oh.
His timing, Jake Roberts. Another guy who was incredible to work with was Harley Race, Ric Flair, and another fellow who was a babyface who was extremely talented, and one of the greatest was Ricky Steamboat.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I was very fortunate. I had some great talent when I started in the AWA, in 73, 74, and then they sent me down to Kansas City for a year. I almost starved to death down there working for Bob Geigel and
Oh,
Pat O'Connor. But I did learn, and I saw the Briscoe brothers and I saw the Funks, and it was a learning process.
yeah. Speaking of Mad Dog Rashawn, you were a part of the Tales from the Territories recently with the new series that's co-created by Vice and of course Seven Bucks Productions, the Rock's company. And it's really interesting to see. I am a sucker for old school wrestling stories. I love wrestling stories. I've been a journalist for over a decade now, and I've interviewed you before at Pancakes and Power Slam show a few years back, and I've interviewed Greg. I mean, I don't know, probably close to 10 times now, because it's like I just love that story element. I've interviewed many Hall of Famers and current people and stuff like that, but it's like from a journalistic standpoint, I mean, they get interviews all the time, so it's just a variation of the same story that they're passing around from one site to the other. But at the same time, like I love a good story, and I love listening and looking at those Tales from the Territories. And when you were on there, I loved it. And then the Mad Dog for Sean story that was shared, and the things that he would do, man, in the back of the car and things like that was just absolutely, it was hilarious to me. Before we get into another question, any Mad Dog Vachon, PG rated Mad Dog Vachon stories that you can think of from your time with them?
Well, I write this in the book. I had a single match with him in Omaha, Nebraska. Or no, it was Denver, Colorado. And he was very hard to figure out in the ring, because he'd look down at you and his head would be down like this, and you don't know what he was thinking. So I tied up with him, and he gets me in the corner, and he hits me, and then I just automatically reversed him, and I hit him, and he said, "Harder." So I hit him again, and he said, "Harder." So I hit him, and I hit him right on the button, on the jaw, and he went down, and his bottom hit the bottom turnbuckle, and he popped right up, and he poked me in the eyes, and then he fish hooked me, and he grabbed me from one corner of the ring and threw me out onto the concrete floor. And when I'm on the concrete floor, I rolled over on my back, and all of a sudden there was like a flash bulb went off, and it was complete dark, and he had jumped from the apron with both of his feet on my chest.
Oh.
And when he picked me up, as he threw me back in the ring, he said, "Not that hard." So and that happened, and I thought, holy Jesus, and I thought, oh boy.
That's Mad Dog for you, for sure.
Yeah.
Kelvin is asking, what was your favorite match in your career?
Oh, geez. Well, I had our Broadway 60-minute time limit in St. Paul, and I believe it was in like 1977 or 76, and it was with Nick Bockwinkle. And here's my hometown. I live in Bandit Heights, White Bear Lake, which 8 miles down is St. Paul, and we wrestled in the St. Paul Auditorium, and they had about 6,500 people there, and it was packed. And Nick and I mean, he took care of me so well. I mean, we had an incredible match, and I mean, I really felt like I had achieved something, on an upper level of being able to wrestle in main events with being with him. And it was an incredible match. And I think there's a couple of draws with Nick and I on YouTube. One is from Winnipeg, that was a doggone it's funny because when Nick had, he pounded the crap out of you, boom, 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 boom. And then when you go to make a comeback, I'm making this comeback, and all of a sudden he hits me right smack in the sternum. Oh. Completely deflates all my wind. I go, and then he says, keep coming, and I almost passed out. But I mean, yeah, he was incredible. Yeah.
How was he backstage? Easy to get along with?
Oh, all those guys. I mean, in the AWA, when I first started, there was like 14 guys in the territory. and everybody knew their own position, and everybody they made good money, and because during the winter months everybody's cooped in the AWA as far as the winter and everything. Vern realized that, so during the summer we had a lot of time off, so it was a great matter of fact. Hulk Hogan, he wrestled here for I think it was 82, all of 82, and just set records. Oh boy, they loved him, and he loved Minneapolis because he said it was the first time that he really had time off. He could he could have 4 or 5 days off a week, and work out and do whatever he did. But then they got in an argument and they never did switch the belts to him, so he went to the WWE and or WWF, I guess it was then, in 1983, and he was the Golden Goose. Yeah. Without him, the WWE would not be what it is today.
What do you think Vince saw in him that was so captivating that he wanted to propel him from the very beginning? Like, it was one of those things that the company was in need of that new, just kind of charismatic, infectious babyface. They had Bruno, then they had Backlund, and they were looking for that new babyface. For some reason, Vince saw it in Hogan. Not only did he saw that new babyface in Hogan, he also saw like crossover appeal in Hogan.
He did.
So is that what it was that caused Vince to really sink his teeth in him real easy?
Well, he was just coming off that Rocky III or whatever it was, and people know who he was. Yeah. And Terry was an excellent athlete, and for a big guy like that, 6'7", 320 pounds. I mean, and he could work on the mat. I mean, I saw matches with him in Japan that were incredible, but, and he just grabbed the bull by the horns and, boom, he's just jump on my back, all of us did, and before he came to WWE, there was 26 territories, Doc, that you could wrestle and make a living in. And then when Vince took everything over, there it was Vince, and then you had the WCW or whatever it was in Atlanta, and that was it. So all of a sudden, in like 83 and 84, and I went there in 85, there's 60 guys that were all top workers wherever they went. And so he had 3 towns running a night, Vince did, and he had 20 guys in each town. And a lot of people don't realize this, but in those 1985, 86, or 84, 85, 86, 87, we all worked 27 days a month. That's what we averaged. And some went 52 days in a row. The Iron Sheik, he went 92 days in a row. Wow. Matter of fact, he was gone from his house so long that he finally went home to Atlanta, and he lived a little north of Atlanta, and he was gone so long his wife had redecorated the house, and he drove right by it because he didn't recognize it.
Oh man, yikes. that's so much. See, I guess we got about 10 minutes left. Let me ask you this beforehand,
okay,
before we get into the next question. When it came to that dedication, and I was just having a conversation about this at a recent podcast that I do as well. Now, the dedication that the wrestlers had then, wrestling 300 plus days a year, pulling doubles on weekends and things like that. And it's just the birthdays missed, the graduations missed, the births missed, like the time away from family. Explain to me, as someone who was on the road that much and had colleagues that was on the road that much, explain to me the sacrifice that the wrestlers was willing to do, and explain to me if that was such a strain on the relationship with family and friends as well. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, to me, the wives were the number one, they held the family together, the wrestling family. I was so fortunate because my wife did an excellent job in raising our 2 kids. And then at the same time, I had a gym, a business when I was in New York, for another year.
Mm-hmm.
I had to jump in Jim Brunzell's gym, so she was running that,
Mm-hmm.
and I all the credit goes to her, and where I was so fortunate to have such a great mate, a lot of guys weren't,
Sure.
and things, I mean, it's hard when you're on the road because you try, you don't like it, but hey, if you want to wrestle and you want to be a pro wrestler and you want to make the most money you can make, you had to go to New York.
Yeah.
So all of us were in that doggone situation, and some guys didn't fare well. Some guys, I mean, it's just like any other part of society. You had drugs and alcohol and sex and everything. I mean, it was hard.
Yeah.
And I applaud everybody that made it through there unscathed, because we were all fortunate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for thank you for sharing that. All right, let's get into these questions. AJ's asking, did you work with Herb Abrams with the
boy.
UWF?
Yeah, Herb was a real character. I mean, he had it all down. I mean,
electricity.
Yeah, he was he was a promoter, and I remember one time we went to Las Vegas, and he had a show, and he booked the MGM Grand. So, and then he's got, I don't know, he had about 6 or 7 matches, and he did a great job, but I mean, he just didn't have a follow through, I mean, first of all, he didn't have really good TV, and that's where Vince, was so fortunate, because he had Dick Ebersol, who worked for Wide World of Sports, and Dick Ebersol is the one who produced the WWF's TV, and that's why people watch that TV and they think, holy gosh, they're looking at their normal TV, from the guys in wherever it was, Oregon or Texas, or in Minneapolis. You just couldn't compare. I mean, their production costs were in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, whereas the other promoters, they'd spend $2,000 for their TV production. There's just no way.
I was just in Vegas last week, and MGM. I was in the MGM Grand, and it's huge. And do you think that he was going to have? What made him so confident that he thought that he was going to have that type of following to fill up that spot, or wherever room they were in, that quick in the promotion?
Well, I think that he thought that the way he shotgunned and the way he presented and promoted his package, and I mean, he tried hard, and I think, I can remember, I think he did some tapings in Vegas too for his TV show, but actually it drew about, I don't know, 6,000-7,000 people. I mean, I don't know what that holds, 15 or something like that, or 12 or whatever. But I remember afterwards he had a party in his room, and I think the party lasted 2 days.
Yeah, I saw the Dark Side episode from him, and just how he was
out of control.
Yeah, for sure.
And I mean, we had all left, and Herb was still there in the suite.
Oh man, he was a partier. He partied
sure
hard.
Was. God rest his soul.
Indeed. How was it work? Briefly teaming with Owen Hart.
Owen Hart was a sweetheart of a guy, God, and he was so conscientious, and he was so talented. And I spent a couple of weeks with him on the road, and I'll tell you what happened one night. He had hurt his knee a little bit, and we were in California. We tried 3 different hotels trying to get a room, and then we had to fly out at 8:00 the next morning. And every room, and we're in the rent-a-car, and we're going from one Marriott to wherever it was, and then so the third one I went to, and I came back to the car, and I said, "Geez," I said, "Owen," I said, "They're booked. They don't have any rooms." And he kicked the dash with his good leg, and when he kicked the dash, it shattered the windshield. So I thought, oh Jesus! So we got to bring the car back. So we finally found a place, and I brought the car back, and I snuck out of there and ran whatever it was, Hertz, and when he kicked the dashboard and the window broke, he looked at me and he says, "Oh, Jimmy, I'm so sorry." And I looked and I thought, but it worked out okay. But he was a good kid and so talented. Oh, what a tragedy!
Yeah,
what a tragedy!
really
Wonderful
sad.
kid.
Indeed. Yeah, people like y'all make the car rental process a lot more tedious and strenuous because of all of those late nights, walkaways and abandonments of cars and all the car rental stories that pro wrestlers share. The process now is a lot difficult.
Can I tell you a real quick one? Do we got time?
Absolutely.
Okay, absolutely. We're in Las Vegas and we're going to go to Texas. So John Nord, the Berserker, was gambling all night long, and he was drinking all night long, and so we're all bored. They only had one flight to fly to Dallas to make it on time, and I think it left at about 9:30, 10 o'clock. So all of a sudden they're about ready to shut the doors, and we're all on there, and all of a sudden the door opens up again, and boom, here comes John Nord, and he's sweating like a son of a gun. He's got his bag, and he goes, sits down, and about 2 minutes later, all of a sudden they says, "It'll just be a moment, people. We have somewhat of a problem here." So these two cops got on the plane and they grabbed John Nord. What he had done, he'd overslept, so he had his rent-a-car and he drove right up to the departure, got out of the rent-a-car and left it there running.
Oh,
and went through to whatever it was, Delta or United, and just left the car there, and they arrested him.
Wow.
He, needless to say, he missed the Dallas shot.
Yeah,
but,
very interesting.
Yeah,
there's so many stories. I love hearing stuff like that, man. All right, let's see. Elvis is asking, did you ever work with Rapid Ricky Romero or any of his kids? Also, any stories about Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff?
I did. I knew Ricky Romero and his son Jay, who Jay Youngblood was a hell of a talent in Charlotte. And where the heck was I? I think I was over in Japan with him too. But I want to tell you about Paul Orndorff. Paul Orndorff became a born-again Christian, and a lot of guys, use some foul language, and a lot of guys would take the Lord's name in vain, and it ticked him off. So he approached me one time, and he said, Brunzell, he says, doggone it, he says, you're taking the Lord's name in vain too much. He says, if I'm going to ride with you, I'd appreciate it if you could, refrain from doing that. So I told him, I said, okay, Paul, I says, I have a favor to ask then. And he says, what's that? I says, would you give me a kiss on my cheek? And then I won't say it anymore. So he says, I suppose so. So he went to kiss me on the cheek, and I turned and I kissed him on the lips, and he was furious. He chased me out of the locker room, and he was he was mad. He would have caught me, he probably would have killed me. Yeah. So about a week later, he says, I'm going to get you back, Brunzell. I'm going to get you back. So sure enough, we all dipped Copenhagen, So he found a cockroach and he put it in my Copenhagen, tin. So after the match was, as soon as after the match was, I'd grab the tin and I'd stick a load my lip, and I'd go in the shower. So all of a sudden I load my lip, and I'm seeing the tobacco walk out of my mouth, and it was a cockroach, and he laughed. He says,
very nice rib.
He says, I told you I'd get you back. And
very nice.
Yeah. He was a great guy, and a super tough guy, and a very talented guy in the ring. Yeah. God, he was. And he had the body. Oh, he had a great body. One of the best bodies ever.
Indeed. And one of the
great
best
guy.
One of the best pile drivers in the business.
Oh, God.
Sure, man. Just a lethal pile driver.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, to me, Lawler and Orndorff is the two. Like that's the echelon, the top echelon when it comes to pile drivers. They really put that move. They made the move look like you don't want to even be a part on the other end of that pile driver for sure. So how was it taking a pile driver before we go? How was it taking a pile driver? And did anybody botch the pile driver when they were trying to put it on you?
Well, I had very few instances where I had to take a pile driver, but if the guy protects you, but you also have your hands on the guy's thighs.
Yeah.
And you can sort of position so that you sort of, if you think you're going to, you can push your hands out there a little bit on his thighs to control that downward motion of your head. But, there's been a couple times when, you see stars, and I'm sure that, I'm sure that a lot of guys saw stars from a lot of the pile drivers.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Nowadays, unfortunately, people are looking for that really big spot nowadays that it doesn't seem like they protect, the other opponent as much as they used to, when it comes to stuff like that. So,
Doc, when you watch the sequences on both AEW and WWE now, I mean, they do so much in the ring and so many different high spots and so many different false finishes. They don't mean anything because they all kick out of them, and you watch the match. I can't watch it anymore. I watched the other night, and I'm trying to think of the guy from the WWE who's, I don't know. I can't think of his name now, but
what do you have? What do you look like?
Well, he's got the long black hair, and he's a big heel now. And I'm trying to think of his name. I just saw
Roman Reigns.
Pardon?
Roman Reigns.
No, the other one.
You
with
have
the beard,
black
beard. He's going to be on the main event, and I don't know who's he's going to be wrestling, but
you have Seth Rollins.
That's him.
Okay.
Seth. Yeah. I mean, Roman Reigns, and I watch very, very little of the wrestling. To me, it's gotten to the point now where they're all the same. I mean, there's no baby face. Everybody's a heel. Everybody's a hard guy, a bad guy, and tough as nails. And they don't want to sell because they don't want to project weakness. And you can't make a match unless you sell. Yep. You got to get that heat in order for that guy to make a comeback, but they don't realize that. And consequently the package, I mean, what you're seeing a lot of production, and there's a lot of good stuff in the ring. I mean, these guys are very athletic, but it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Agreed. Let's promote your book one more time before we head out, man.
Here it is right here. There's a better picture of me. I was a little that's a young picture.
What year was that?
Oh, I'd say that would be 1985. So that's about 38 years ago. But the book is good, and I've got so many different. Matter of fact, where is it here? Oh, I got a nice little chapter on Bruce Springsteen, how he's been, so influential in my life. Nice. In terms of, my hero. And matter of fact, he's going to be here in St. Paul in 10 days. So I'm going to go to the show, and hopefully I'll be able to see him. So
sounds good.
Yeah, but thanks again, Doc, for, it's a real easy read. I tell my people who buy it, I says, just stick it in the bathroom. I said, you'll read it in no time.
There you go. Awesome. Jim, it's been a pleasure talking to you, man.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it went very good, and you do a great job, Doc.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Have a good night, my man.
You too.
Right,
bye.